Now, literally, I just got back from seeing Mad Max Fury Road for the second time in theaters, and I'm super pumped. Let's get this countdown going. Okay, so you might be wondering why I'm making this list and why I'm not waiting till the very end of the year to make my top 40 or 50 or whatever I'm going to eventually do for 2015. Well, simply put, there are way too many movies I want to see, so when I eventually catch up and see all the movies of 2015 that I want to see, and the ones that I have to see because they're so bad, it might be a few months into 2016 before I'm done. I want to give all the movies I'm interested in a chance so that when I actually comprise a best of 2015, they all have a shot of being the best. So since it might take a while to make a best of 2015 list for me, I might as well do a halfway point where I say the best of 2015 so far. And so now I'm looking at all the movies that I have seen, which is 67 so far, that have come out from anywhere from January 2015 to June 2015. But first I have a few disclaimers I want to get out of the way. Number one, this top 15 list is just my opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Not everybody is going to love the same movies that everyone else loves. Number two, I am only looking at movies that have come out in January through June of 2015. And lastly, there are some movies on this list that you might consider a 2014 movie. Well, that's because I look at the theater release dates, and if a movie has come out on July 2015, then I feel it's a 2015 movie. And a lot of 2014 movies got pushed back to January, February, and even March of 2015. So some movies that other people consider 2014 movies are 2015 in my opinion. And also, I have not seen every single movie from January to June of 2015. There are some movies that I missed. There are some movies that I'm interested in that never came to our theater, so I have to wait for them to come out on DVD to either buy or rent or find other means of watching them. With all those disclaimers said, let's just get down to the countdown, shall we? Alright, I might as well start out with some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 15 mark, but are movies that I felt were really entertaining. So I might as well start off with some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 15 mark, but are really good movies nonetheless. And they are in no particular order: Ted, Jurassic World, Chappie, Unfriended, and Insidious Chapter 3. So the only movie on this list that I've legitimately given 4 stars, but is more of a 4.25 for me, is The Voices. I found The Voices extremely quirky, crazy, dark humor galore, a parody of Hollywood's version of schizophrenia. And Ryan Reynolds did a really good job at finding a way to be able to sympathize for this type of character, even though he's legitimately the kind of a serial killer. And I bought his character, I sympathized for him because it felt like he was the good person and there was other people in his head that was making him kill. And I think it did a really good job at getting into the head of the main character to the point where it felt like you were seeing exactly what he was seeing, even though it's not a first-person perspective. It's just it feels like a really close third. I found it entertainingly fresh and I love it to bits. The only bad thing I can say about this movie is the very, very end with the musical number, which makes no sense, and you should stop the movie before it turns into a musical, because that did not need to be there, and it's the only reason it's not a 4.5 star for me. Hell, it could have even been a 5-star movie if it wasn't for that frickin' musical number. Now, number 14 is the first action movie on this list that isn't a blockbuster like you would expect. It's action, but it's very subtle, very tense, and suspenseful. It is 71. Now, 71 is not your typical action movie, and it's hard to even consider it an action movie. Yes, there's some great suspense, great shootouts, there's an explosion, and there's enough in there to call it an action, but it's also a drama, and a very subtle drama that doesn't give you all the information and lets you connect the pieces yourself. There's a very realistic tone to it, and it's very gratifying to see. Number 13 is something I didn't quite expect would be as amazing as it was. I saw a lot of really good reviews for this movie, and I thought, it doesn't even look that interesting. But then when I saw the trailer, I thought, you know what? There could be something to this, and I was right. What We Do in the Shadows, and it's a really good parody of reality TV, just with vampires, and it's not the Twilight sparkling vampires. It is real traditional vampires that lived in the medieval times. One of them has. At times it feels just like a really long Saturday night sketch or something along those lines, but it is incredibly entertaining, and there's a lot of cleverness to it that I never would have expected. It's definitely not for everyone, but I laughed a lot in this movie. Number 12 is the only animated movie to make it on this list, and I'm sure you've guessed it, Inside Out. Now, I am creating a best of Pixar films, and while Inside Out is definitely in my top 10, it's not really that high up. So it's not one of the best Pixar films I've seen, but it is one of the best Pixar films that has come out recent years, and I have to commend it for that. There's a lot of interesting ideas, a lot of things that they did just right. The only problem is it didn't have as emotional punch as I would have loved it to have, like other Pixar films have. So only because of that, it's a 4.5, but there's so many great things about it that a lot of people will not be disappointed. Alright, we're almost at the top 10, and number 11 is another action film that's more of a suspense and thriller, and it is Black Sea. Now, to be honest, there's a lot of things that are cliched in Black Sea, and there's a lot of things that you've seen in any typical submarine thriller. But at the same time, it is another one of those movies where people are after something important, and greed gets a hold of everyone and turns them against each other. So yes, you've seen this kind of movie several times before, but Black Sea does it incredibly well. And Jude Law is phenomenal in it, but Jude Law is a great actor, so come on, what did you expect? Number 10 is the only family film to make my top 10 so far, and it's a January film, but it was originally going to be a 2014 movie. I'm talking about Paddington. I didn't know what to expect with Paddington because I've never read any of the children's books. I didn't know anything about Paddington, but there's something about Paddington. This film is just great. It's a great time for the family because there's enough jokes in it that are adult themed, and there's enough that are for children as well. It's a very good mixture. The CGI on the Paddington Bear is incredible, but what do you expect from the people that did some of the visual effects for Harry Potter franchise? Everything that is explained in the movie takes part in the ultimate climax of the film, and it feels like every little information they give you works to the advantage of the plot, rather than something that's thrown in there meaninglessly to just get a laugh. And I gotta say that it's one of the family films that, just like Up, starts off with an emotional punch. Yeah, there's something tragic that happens at the beginning that I was not prepared for, and while Up has a greater beginning, Paddington holds its own. Alright, number 9 is another movie that some people consider 2014 material, and yeah, it was awarded an Oscar win for 2014, but it came out in either January or February of 2015, and that is Still Alice. Now, this is a very quick and very short drama that holds a lot of impact. This is one of those dramas that when I first watched it, it didn't really have as much of an impact on me until I saw it a second time and noticed all the little techniques they use, and noticed I had more of an emotional attachment the second time around, and I love it. Not even Kristen Stewart being in the movie could harm this film. It's still a 4.5 for me, but it has rised up in the ranks for my countdown, and I gotta say, every time I watch it, I like it even more because I noticed something else that I hadn't noticed before. And despite all the tragedy and despite the sadness in this movie, there is some moments where it is completely depressing, but there's some tendency of hope. There's some little hope in this film that can guide you throughout the rest, and it's emotional and it's a great drama that I didn't expect to see in my top 10, but currently it is in my top 10. Alright, for number 8, we have another movie that came out in January. This is one of those years where January had some really great films, and it's mainly because a lot of these films were coming from 2014 that got pushed back to 2015. And this is one of the first movies I saw this year, and I was completely blown away. I have it right there in my Blu-ray collection. I can see it. And I bought it as soon as it came out. It is Predestination. It is a great sci-fi and a great time-traveling movie that you think is going to be an action thriller, but it's more of a drama and more of a character piece. So it actually had some... I was surprised by it because I wasn't expecting it to be just as dramatic and a character piece. I was thinking this was going to be a simple thriller with a good sci-fi twist to it, kind of like Looper. And I also thought Ethan Hawke would be a standout in the movie, but even though he is great, like he usually is in any kind of bad movie or good movie, no matter what you put him in, he's great. But someone else caught my attention, and she did, and our main girl, she was the best in this entire movie, and her name is Sarah Snook, and she blew it out of the water. And now, just like any time-traveling movie, it is not perfect, and there's things that left me scratching my head wondering how this could work, and it's more because of this causality loop in this movie, and those are the things in time-traveling movies that really confuse me to the point where, how is this even possible? This doesn't really make sense. But other than that, it is a near-perfect time-traveling movie that happens to be more of a drama and more of a character pick than you would ever expect. And it is got some thrilling moments, but it's really not a thriller like the trailer would make you think it is. Alright, number 7 is a pretty recent movie review that I did, and it is Dope. There isn't much more I can say about Dope that I haven't said already, other than it's just really funny. It's actually really grounded and really dramatic, and it has a really good uniqueness to it, and it's the kind of uniqueness that feels like it's a bunch of different movies that you recognize and remember, all melded together in a completely different story. I know these films sound wrong to say because it is nothing like these films, but at the same time, it does borrow premises from movies like Pineapple Express and a mixture of Superbad meets some gangster movie that you would expect. It's got a lot of different things in it. Dope is just a mixture of great things that comes out into a fairly original story that I'm sure a lot of people will love. Alright, number 6 was one of the big blockbusters that came out this summer that I was really amped up for, and while part of me likes it better than the first one, at the same time part of me feels like there's a few more flaws in it that wasn't in the first one. So I have to give it a little bit of a lesser rating than what I gave the original. So it's another 4.5 star for me. And that is Avengers Age of Ultron. Yeah, I know some of you are thinking that was a big disappointment. Why should you even have it on your list? But yeah, I'm a big superhero fan, and there was a lot of good things in Avengers Age of Ultron, a lot of exciting things, and a lot of things that they left out in the first Avenger and filled in the gaps in the second one. And while there are some moments where it feels rushed and sometimes it feels like there are deleted scenes that we're not quite getting, it's mainly because it had to actually get cut down. So maybe when it comes out on Blu-ray and I actually see the deleted scenes, if those deleted scenes really fill in the gaps that the theatrical version has, then the Blu-ray version might be a 5-star movie for me. That's why I'm giving it a 4.5, because it feels like something is missing, but it was probably because it was cut out of the original film. Does it feel a little bit like Avengers? Yeah, but what do you expect? It's an Avengers movie. I mean, come on. Okay, while I do really like Unfriended and Insidious Chapter 3, there's only one horror movie that can easily make my top 10 list right now. And it's because it reminds me of Babadook, and I actually like it better than the Babadook, and that is It Follows. Yeah, I think It Follows is a little bit more mainstream than the Babadook, but at the same time, I was more creeped out by It Follows. There was a lot of similar things it had with the Babadook, but there's things that I was impressed with more for It Follows. Similar to the Babadook, it feels like the main monster is just a symbolism for something real that is horrific. And it doesn't sound too horrific, but I guess it's a symbolism for STD and unprotected sex, right? While the Babadook represented several different things, with having to raise a child by themselves and having to deal with the lost husband and having to deal with going crazy and going mad when it comes to taking care of an unruly child. And so I think those are the things that ground It Follows and the Babadook to something that isn't exactly just your typical horror movie. So number 4 is a movie that came out in January of 2015, but it was nominated for Best Picture of 2014, and it didn't win. Birdman won, which I'm glad it won, because even though Birdman is somewhere in my top 5 or 6, it's still the best movie that they had for Best Pictures in my opinion. But number 4 is Selma, and it's another biopic that came out this year, and it is incredibly great. David Oyelowo was really great as Martin Luther King. He fit the part, and it felt like I was watching Dr. Martin Luther King rather than an actor playing as him. He fit the bill perfectly, and it's a really intense and great drama. It was almost a 5-star film for me. The only reason it's not is because of the overuse of slow motion, which sometimes works and sometimes is more of a disadvantage for the movie. Okay, we have gotten to the top 3 people, and the top 3 films are all 5-star worthy for me. And while some people might not feel they're 5-star worthy, well, this is just my opinion. Number 3 was the first movie I had a phenomenal time in the theater, and it was completely fun. It was awesome. It was Kingsman: The Secret Service. Do you want to know how much I liked this film? From before this came out, Selma was my number 1 movie for 5 weeks. And then Kingsman came out, and it was my favorite film this year for 10 weeks in a row. Yeah, I keep track. Kingsman is incredible. It's action-packed. It's funny. It's very much like Kick-Ass. The only difference is it's spies, and all the acting was great. Even Samuel Jackson really surprised me, which I like him, but he plays the same character pretty much all the time. And for the first time in a while, it felt like he was actually playing someone completely different. And he had a unique villain, and I commend him for that. It was really excellent. Okay, the movie that knocked Kingsman off of number 1 for me and stayed my number 1 film for about 3 weeks was Ex Machina. It's my favorite sci-fi movie so far this year, and it has a good chance of staying number 2 throughout the entire year. It was incredible, artistic. It was something that I didn't expect. It's a really good slow burner thriller. A lot of people like to point out a bunch of little flaws and the little plot holes of Ex Machina, but when I started thinking about it and when I started reading a bunch of different comments on other reviews, I realized, you know what? It might not be as holy and it might not be as flawed as you might think. There's some really great examples of why some of the plot holes aren't really plot holes. And I remember getting in an argument with someone, and he finally just quit because he couldn't think of anything to say, I guess. But basically I had a little comment war on someone that believed Ex Machina was one of the worst films this year. Clearly that person has not seen Hot Pursuit. And so I was having an argument with someone else who felt like you're just the same cliched sci-fi robot movie where robots go against man. And I said, have you seen the movie at all? It's like you're describing something completely different. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I love about Ex Machina, and I like it even more now, and it's probably going to stay up there for a very long time. Okay, here we go. The #1 film of 2015 from January to June so far that I've seen is the movie that I just came back from seeing a second time, and that is Mad Max Fury Road. It is absolutely epic. It is great blockbuster, a lot of practical effects that you would never expect, and it is pure adrenaline rush. A lot of people complain that the story is simple, but people, all the Mad Max films have had a simple plot. And while it is a simple plot, just like Road Warrior, there's a lot of different subtle things in the movie that help progress the backstory of the characters, that help progress the world that they're living in, and there's a lot more to be found than you might think. It's one of those blockbusters that you can get your crazy awesome action with very little CGI, actually a lot of practical effects and a lot of real explosions with real cars being wrecked. But at the same time, you can get a really heartfelt story melded deep within it that is very subtle and actually very commendable. It's one of those movies that actually has several different character arcs within the film, and so every time you go into it, you can focus on a certain character and you find something new that you didn't expect in the other times you've seen the movie. But then again, this is one of those films where you don't need a lot of dialogue in it to actually understand everything and actually understand the backstory and the turmoil that is happening in the present and what is happening in the minds of the characters. Now, when I talked about Paddington and Dope having a lot of elements that all work for the movie by the end of the film, that all work together in a way that is cohesive, melds well, and has meaning to the whole story, Mad Max has that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of little things, a lot of little details that help build the world that Mad Max is in, and you can completely buy it. Even though there's a lot of crazy things that happen, it feels like it fits the world. All the cars feel like everything on them is completely practical and has a purpose. Basically everything in the film feels like it has meaning, and I have to commend a blockbuster for having that, because even some of the great blockbusters that you love and can have a fun time and have a decent story, even some of those movies forget things like that. There is something more to be said about Mad Max, and I think that's another reason why it is actually #1 on Rotten Tomatoes for 2015 so far. Even though Selma keeps jumping back from 99 to 98, when it comes to critics and when it comes to the top 100 films of 2015, Mad Max is right at the top. It's Mad Max, Selma, Inside Out. I can't remember what 4th is, but I think 5th is Paddington. So yeah, Mad Max Fury Road is my #1 movie of 2015 so far, and really the only movie that I can think that can knock it off of its pedestal, the only movie that I can predict that might have the possibility of being greater than Mad Max Fury Road might be the new Star Wars film. So yeah, that's my top 15 movies of 2015 so far. And what do you think? What movies are your top 15 movies so far this year? And don't include any July movies. I'm talking about movies from January to June. Which movies are your favorite? And maybe there's some movies that I have not seen that you think are incredible. I know I really have to see A Most Violent Year. It looks amazing. I did get to see the first 45 minutes of it before I had to leave and do something else because I was busy during the time. But I saw the first 40 minutes, and so far it looks like a movie that can easily be 4.5 or 5-star movie for me. And so that might make this list very shortly. So yeah, what is your favorite? Do you agree with this list? What'd you think about it? And what are your favorite movies of 2015 so far? Go ahead and comment. I'd love to hear what everyone else's favorite movies are so far. And as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.